Welcome back. This is number 9 of 100, the 100 mold project. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this week. I want to test a concept for what I hope to be the first of many molds utilizing these concepts for creating small flat molds. I think this opens up a lot of possibilities. All of our other molds are multiple pieces for casting, and something that I'm trying to proof out this week is to make just a one-piece mold on the mill. This week I'm going to be making smaller objects, but I do hope that this can be scaled up for trays and other objects, maybe even coasters. These were designed with jewelry in mind, but I have some other use cases that I hope to test them out with once I make this mold. So this is the first draft of the mold tray. I'm going to mill this out of a 3/4 inch piece of acrylic. Usually acrylic this size starts to get pretty pricey. A few months ago, I got a bunch of scraps for $1 a pound from a local acrylic supplier fabricator. So instead of testing on foam, which I would do if it was a pricier piece of stock, I'm just gonna go straight for the actual finished product out of the acrylic. If it messes up, I'm not too worried about it. I have milled acrylic before, so I do have some familiarity with the speeds and feeds and how to do it, but I haven't done anything with this size and depth. When figuring out the tool paths, I'm trying to do most of this with 3 main tools. A trusty mini shear I use a lot, a 1/4 inch end mill for more detailed roughing passes. Then the plan is to come in with a single flute plastic end mill for finishing. In the end, I decided to change the layout to minimize the use of silicone. I ended up rotating the wide piece so it makes the tray much smaller. You can see here I'm verifying my finishing path and making sure that my 1/4 inch end mill will fit in all the grooves to clear out material so I don't have to use anything smaller. The first step is to set up my work holding on the table. I have about a 4 inch wide workspace set up for projects that use what's called the super glue method of work holding. And that is because I don't really want to have to take anything else off the table to do this quick project. Basically, you use painter's tape and super glue to hold down objects. I have a piece of acrylic next to my chuck with the groove cut out to help remove the super glue pieces after I finish, and it also acts as a spoil board so I don't gouge my much pricier work plate. I also do a lot of checks to make sure my tools aren't going to crash into the chuck and that I have enough X travel to create this mold. Now that all the checks are done, I go ahead and get my mallet and tap it a few times, the workpiece, to make sure it is not going to be removed when the tools start cutting. This first operation is with my mini shear, and it clears out most of the material. You can see here, if you look closely, that it's actually leaving a small groove in the workpiece. I don't really use this tool for any finishing, but later on I'm going to be using it to finish the faces. So I pause here to check and make sure that there's not anything loose, and it turns out one of the screws was just slightly loose by the tiniest little bit. And if you see, now that it's fixed, it is not having that little tiny gouge in the piece. The next operation is an adaptive clearing with a 1/4 inch end mill. At the time, I felt like this was pushing a touch too hard by the sound of the tool. I should have stuck with my gut and stopped. It ends up to be that I think this is the pass that chips the acrylic a bit around the sides, and you can see the shapes are starting to take form. And even though after I do this pass I see the chips, I decide to keep going and test out the rest of the operations. And then next comes in the single flute plastic bit to finish. Here it's contouring the sides, and it does an excellent job. And last, the mini shear is coming in to do a facing operation. It ends up that this facing operation, I must be going way too fast, and the finish is really not that great. And the last operation, the 1/4 inch end mill comes and cuts the outside contour wall. This one I went really slow because I'm very worried that it's going to hit the chuck on the right, even though I had tested beforehand. It ends up working out well, though it was a little bit nerve-wracking. And after that last finishing pass is done, I come in and start examining the results. There are a few chips along the edges, and I get the idea that maybe to combat them, what I'll do is a chamfer around the top sides, which will kind of do a break around that top edge, which is nice anyway. And then I'll just face off about 5 thousandths of material, which really isn't that much and won't change the mold size of any significance. That facing pass with a single flute gave a nice smooth finish and cleaned up what the mini shear the grooves had left behind. Unfortunately, right here the camera actually dies, but here is the chamfering tool starting to do its job. And here's the finished tray. It came out really well considering the hurdles I kind of had to go through on this one. I don't know if I'm going to try to make another one before I release this for sale, but I'm going to wait and see how the casts come out first, and I might just be pleasantly surprised. So here I am casting it out of concrete. If you're casting something this small, one thing I've learned is adding a polymer modifier, and here I am using the Sika liquid one that I can find at my Home Depot or Lowe's, I can't remember. And I add this instead of water to the mix, and it ends up on these thin, small castings to produce something that's not very fragile. The same can be said if you were mixing it with a plaster. Kind of the same idea as Jessamite. And here are the finished casted charms. They came out really cute, but I do think I'm going to go back to the drawing table on this one and see if I can't redo this little tray with better finishes now that I've learned so much. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.